turns as it becomes wet and windy through into Wednesday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, thank you for being a big part of GB News.
We'd like to wish you and your loved ones a Christmas season full of comfort and joy,
as well as a peaceful
and prosperous new year.
From our family
to yours.
We are proud to be your channel.
Merry Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Merry Christmas.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Good evening and Merry Christmas, lovely people. By the magic of Christmas, I am appearing to you now from an unfamiliar studio, but we'll see how it goes. Welcome along to Neil Oliver Live, as usual, on GB News TV and on the wireless set. Tonight on the show, I'll be joined by author, commentator and former chaplain to the Queen, Gavin Ashendon, to talk about the religious meaning of Christmas and the highs and lows of 2023. I'll be joined by American author Laurel Gillan, who has written an award-winning novel called A Bellwether Christmas, which tells a story of Christmas in medieval times. It was inspired by historical events. We will be asking what Christmas Day would have been like back in the 13th century. And finally, we'll be speaking to Professor Ralph Schulhammer, a friend of the show, to discuss the history of the Christmas tree. All of that and lots of chat with my panellist, Andrew Eborn. But first, an update on the latest news headlines.
Thanks, Neil. Good evening. I'm Ray Anderson in the GB Newsroom. Merry Christmas to you all. Our top stories. One of the UK's richest men has agreed to buy a 25% stake in Manchester United. Billionaire and Ineos chairman Sir Jim Ratcliffe says he wants to take Man U to the very top of English, European and world football. The move will see around £236 million pumped into the club and includes the responsibility of managing its operations. Police are urging drivers to take extra care on the roads following a number of collisions in the past 24 hours. Millions of motorists are on the highways this weekend, the AA telling drivers to expect lengthy jams as people travel for their Christmas getaways. The Met Office is also warning of the risks of flying debris and power cuts, with wind gusts of up to 70 miles per hour hitting parts of Scotland and northern England. Rail passengers have been dealing with delays and cancellations as well, with major London stations closing for engineering works. Well, party leaders may be at odds in Parliament, but they are united in spreading festive cheer this year. Now, warning for those of you watching on television, some of the footage we're about to show contains flash photography. In his Christmas message, the Prime Minister offered a promise of a brighter future, while Labour's Sir Keir Starmer said that the story of Jesus is a reminder that in dark times, hope and love are always worth advocating for. Both leaders have thanked frontline and key workers for their service over the Christmas period. Well, the King will deliver his second Christmas message from a room decorated with a living Christmas tree for the first time. A photograph has been released ahead of tomorrow's broadcast. King Charles is a long-term environmental campaigner, so sustainable and natural ornaments are hanging from the tree, which will be replanted at a later date. And you can watch the King's message here on GB News at 3 p.m. on Christmas Day. Tomorrow is set to be the warmest Christmas day in more than a century, with the Met Office saying that temperatures will reach 14 or even 15 degrees. That's after 15.3 was recorded at Heathrow and Sippenham in Berkshire today, making it the warmest Christmas Eve in over 20 years. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now let's get back to Neil Oliver.
I've always been a child around and about Christmas. My folks were especially good at doing Christmas, and it rubbed off on me. I've never grown out of it or beyond it. For the 20-plus years that I've had my own family, my own children, it's only made me fonder. Their childhoods gave me all the excuse I needed to extend my own indefinitely, wallowing in all that Christmas has always meant to me. As I'm sure is true for most, my first memory of hearing the story of the Nativity, of the birth of Jesus, is from my earliest school days. I still regard it as one of the most comforting and hopeful stories of all. The bare outlines of what became the stuff of a gazillion nativity plays for children to perform, my own included, are split between the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. Mary and Joseph travelling to Bethlehem, no room at the inn, an infant laid in a manger, shepherds sent by an angel to see him, a guiding star, 3 kings bearing gifts. St. Francis of Assisi is credited with putting on the first nativity play in 1223, having been given permission by the Pope. Apparently his production featured a hay-lined manger, a donkey, an ox, and a sermon about the baby Jesus. Renaissance artists like Leonardo, Michelangelo, Botticelli and Raphael all painted nativity scenes and so fixed images in everyone's minds: the appearance of the angel, the adoration of the shepherds and kings, the flight of the Holy Family out of danger and into Egypt. Historians debate every scrap, of course, some speculating that it was only fiction, added many decades after the crucifixion to satisfy early Christian audiences keen to know the circumstances of the birth of their Messiah. I'm not moved either way by any of the speculation and doubt. None of it matters as far as I'm concerned. The story just works for me, like magic, always has and always will. As with so much in the Bible, there are layers of meaning that might be overlooked and yet carry so much weight. We get the reference to the inn from the Greek word kataluma that more accurately describes a room in an ordinary home offered to guests, travellers with nowhere else to go. The name Jesus means to deliver or to rescue. Bethlehem means house of bread, and Jesus is laid in a feeding trough for animals as a reminder that he will grow to be food for all, an invitation to a table from which their lowly status had previously left them excluded. Shepherds were the lowest of the low in Israelite society, but it was they who were sent by the angel to welcome Jesus first of all. The Christmas story is about kindness to strangers, help for those in need, about feeding the poorest and hungriest. If we forget Christmas, we forget what it is to be human, or perhaps humane. It's about a mother and her baby and hope everlasting in the darkest of times. It's a story about light kindled in the dark, and we tell it to our children in what might otherwise be the darkest week of the year here in the northern latitudes. December 25th was likely adopted as the date of the birth to unite and so include older traditions and festivals. The 25th was the date of the Roman festival of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, celebrating the coming of longer days and shorter nights after the winter solstice. It was close enough as well to Saturnalia, the mid-December festival when Romans sang songs, kindled lights, shared food and exchanged gifts. But for all that I love Christmas, like no other time of year, I'm hardly blind to the reality of the world just now. My children have intensified my pleasure in everything, the significance of everything, but that's double-edged. From the moment I had a child, children, it's been impossible to watch or hear about anything happening to other children, other people's children in other places, anything bad of any sort, without seeing the faces of my own, remembering always the vulnerability of my own. And when it comes to Christmas this year, like no year I remember before, I can't think about me and mine without contemplating what's happening in the benighted Holy Land, where the story of Christmas began. Bethlehem, where we're told Jesus was born, sits now in the West Bank and has been under siege by Israeli forces since the start of the war. Would there still be a room at the inn this year for any lost souls? Some scholars say the Christians of Palestine, in Gaza and the West Bank, are the remnants of the oldest Christian community in the world, with roots in the early 1st century AD. They're known as living stones, a reference to the way the Apostle Peter, the big fisherman, described the role of the first faithful in laying the foundations, being the foundations of the house of God. It seems only a few hundred Christians are left in Gaza now, fewer every day, as it turns out. In the week when the Nativity story tells us about a mother and child, the Holy Family, another mother and child as precious as any others to those who loved them, Christians both, were shot dead within the compound of the Holy Family Church in Gaza, where they had been sheltering from the violence. In this week, when Silent Night is sung all over the Christian world, the leaders of the nominally Christian nations of the West are mostly silent too about the outrage. The Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem said that mother and daughter, Nahida and Simar Anton, were shot by a sniper in cold blood. He said one was killed as she tried to carry the other to safety. 7 more people were shot and wounded as they tried to protect others inside the church compound. No warning was given, no notification was provided. Together in prayer with the whole Christian community, we express our closeness and condolences to the families affected by this senseless tragedy. At the same time, we cannot but express that we are at a loss to comprehend how such an attack could be carried out, even more so as the whole church prepares for Christmas, end quote. While the Patriarchate accuses the Israel Defence Force of the killings, Israel disputes that version of events, but the mother and child are dead all the same, felled by bullets inside the compound of the Holy Family Church. It's hardly as though Christians are alone in dying in that place and at this time. All lives are sacred, and tens of thousands of Muslims and thousands of Jews have been slaughtered too in recent weeks. All people bleed the same colour. Here in the West, it's Christianity of all the faiths that is browbeaten into watering down its festivals, forgetting simple and ancient traditions that have brought comfort and hope to billions of people for more than 2,000 years. During the years just past, years of lockdown and oppression, censorship and coercion, the leaders of the Christian faith have been conspicuous by their silence at best, complicity with the authoritarians at worst. Church doors were closed and locked, congregations left to fend for themselves. What is a church without a congregation, after all? Just another empty building. Over and over, people were told Christmas didn't matter, that gathering with family would just have to be forgotten, that Christmas dinner was just another meal. More than ever before, we need Christmas and must reclaim it. Christmas, at least the best kind of Christmas, can promise so much, celebrates the best of what it is to be human and alive. It's all about gathering with loved ones, defying the dark and the cold. It's about the promise of the most optimistic and hopeful gift there is, which is the birth of a child. Hope of brighter future through the birth of a child is older than Christianity itself, was predicted long before the eventual coming of Jesus. The Roman poet Virgil, who died decades before the birth of Jesus Christ, wrote about the birth of a boy who would bring a golden age to the world, when wickedness would be taken away and the earth freed from fear. The child would receive the life of gods and reign over a world at peace. Precious little hope of that, as it turns out. More and more people have a growing unease about the state of the world. We're made anxious and kept anxious, set at each other's throats, when we should be directing our anger at those who have worked ceaselessly to make the world this way. The book of Isaiah was written around 700 BC. Christians believe Virgil was predicting Jesus Christ just as Isaiah was. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. It matters to remember those words, more of the story. I've mentioned before, and I will again now, a line etched in defiance into the wall of a basement by someone hiding from Nazis during World War II. I believe in the sun even when I cannot see it. I believe in love even when I do not feel it. I believe in God even when he is silent. It feels like we're all under siege now, not just in the beleaguered little town of Bethlehem, but the world over. We're on the outskirts of a dark place. All over the world, wars rage. The millions are on the move. People feel the cold, not just the cold of winter, but of an anti-human ideology that would take everything from us, including each other, including everything that makes Christmas so important. In all circumstances, it is possible, vital, to remember the light, to remember that light and warmth are real. But we can resist in simple and fundamental ways by keeping lights lit and fires warm wherever is possible, by keeping Christmas. Here's the thing, day follows night. Winter follows summer and autumn, but winter, even the darkest winter, knows that the spring is coming, that the spring always comes. Joining me tonight is the broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn. Andrew, you've heard from me there. What does Christmas mean to you?
Well, I like the idea of spring is always round the corner, because, as you say, we're living in the darkest ages at the moment, where hope is the one thing that we can hang on to. And Christmas, I mean, means all sorts of things. It means, well, the two Ronnies sat next to each other in a studio. We love that sort of moment. It's all about family. For me, as with you, with your children, it's about getting family together, reuniting that sort of stuff, fighting over those Sol Invictus games, which is probably Monopoly in these days. It always happens in that sort of thing. But what I love about it is that sort of sense of community again, and it is, as you say, that uniting sense of hope.
And it's the hope that comes from the birth of a child. I would say, whatever your religion, whatever your spirituality, yes, or not, you know, the birth of a child, which is the focus of Christmas, is surely optimism made manifest.
Oh, absolutely, because you're starting from scratch, aren't you? It's a whole new life, and whatever could happen with that life, it basically hasn't got any of the prejudices that the rest of the year might have brought. So I think it's working on that sort of thing. But again, it goes back to what I say about hope. You hope that this new beginning will bring a different era, if you like.
The consumerist, buying everything under the sun, for no apparent reason is not the point. And,
no, absolutely.
And people should not and need not feel excluded by that and from that, because Christmas is about, together. I hear what you're saying, though. I mean, it's true that the loneliness is accentuated for so many people, but all of us, without money, have the power within us to cancel someone else's loneliness.
No, absolutely. And
just by involving them.
Absolutely. And I like the idea that at Christmas time you knock on your neighbours who you may not have spoken to for the rest of the year just to see how they're doing. And as you say, it's not about the commercial side. It's not about money. It's more about involvement. It's about hope. And that doesn't cost anything. A bit of civility, a bit of inclusiveness in this world has got to be good.
How have you interpreted the role of, or the performance of, so-called faith leaders in the years past? From the Church of England through the, which is the Church of the State here, through the Catholic faith, and the Church of Scotland, all of the official presences. How do you think they responded and have been seen to respond to the ongoing challenge?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult, and every day we hear new scandals. They always say, look, trust comes in on foot but leaves on horseback. And you have the Vatican this very week has had a particular scandal with somebody in prison for 5.5 years for embezzlement. And you turn around and the more you hear about these scandals, the more worrying it is. But the church is not a physical place, as you said in your brilliant monologue. It's actually the community. It's the people that make a church. It's the people that build that sort of community. So I think we have some troubled leaders, I think, across not just religion, but across politics and various other things. And I think what we need to do is get back to those common sense things, those values that we hold so dear. And sometimes the leaders can take us in the wrong direction.
And don't you think some of it is because they don't really stand for or believe in anything? And that absence is there with politicians, and it's there with faith leaders, that they're not speaking from the heart and standing up and declaring what they mean and what they say,
right,
without kind of running it first through some sort of public relations filter to see what the ongoing consequences will be for their position.
You're absolutely right. And I think what the problem at the moment, Neil, is we live in a soundbite age where politicians will give you a little soundbite of whatever it is, and there seems to be no depth in that. And the problem with politics is they're in the business of getting re-elected. So by its very nature, it's not long-term, because you're not talking about the fundamental aspects of society, the bits that really bind us together, for me are important, and it's irrelevant about the religion, the politics or otherwise.
Thanks for that, Andrew. After the break, which is upon us already, I will be joined by the British Catholic layman, author and commentator Gavin Ashendon. He's also formerly a priest of the Church of England and subsequently a continuing Anglican bishop, all of which puts him in the perfect position to outline the importance of Christmas for us in the religious calendar. Don't go anywhere.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Deal Oliver Live. Merry Christmas. I'm going to say that again because I like hearing myself say that. Merry Christmas. It is Christmas Eve, tomorrow is Christmas Day, and it's a time to be celebrated all around the world. I'm joined now by Gavin Ashendon to talk about the significance of Christmas. Former priest of the Church of England, more recently converted to the Catholic faith. Good evening, Gavin. Merry Christmas to you.
Neil, Merry Christmas to you and to those who are sharing this moment with us.
Absolutely. It seems to me, Gavin, that it has never mattered more to celebrate Christmas, to keep Christmas, to mark the day. Would you agree?
I would. Something's happened in the last few decades, and certainly during the course of my lifetime, which has meant that the 2 things human beings need, meaning and hope, and perhaps compassion. That would be 3, which reminds me of the Monty Python Inquisition joke. But anyway, 3 things that we need have disappeared, they've been sucked out of life, and they're all 3 things, meaning, hope and compassion, that Christmas provides human beings with, and I think we need them today more than ever.
And Christmas, the heart of Christmas, the birth of the child is, I would say, is hope and optimism made manifest.
I think it is. Being a human being is quite difficult. Where did we come from? Where are we going to? How are we meant to navigate the struggle with good and evil and hope and hopelessness? If there's a God, we need him to make himself tangible. He needs to be available to people who are more than just the mystics, more than the intellectuals. He needs to be available to every human being. And breaking into time and space in human form is a very good way of doing it. And it's really worked quite well.
You mentioned light and dark and ideas of good and evil. So many people write to me, real letters that arrive in the mail about their anxiety and their fear about the present situation in the world, and a sense, more than anything else, that something somewhere is badly wrong, but that they have relied more and more on their faith to get them through. I can only imagine that you empathise with that feeling completely.
I do. I mean, looking back over history, being a human being is quite a precarious exercise. I think in the last few decades, there's been a sense that somehow we could rely on ourselves, modernity, progress, technology. We could protect ourselves to some extent. We've discovered that the protection doesn't work very well, and we need to look for different resources. Resources that are less tangible, you might say more spiritual, more metaphysical. And these are what faith provides. They provide a way of interpreting what's happening to us as human beings. And our society has not been very good at it. We've not been very spiritually literate. We don't understand religious language. And one of the things that Christmas does is it reminds us again that the kind of language we need to work out how to be a human being is available to us. We've just got to, not got to do anything, but it's there for us to take and receive and use it if we want it.
Andrew Eborn, that idea that loss of that literacy, that the loss of the language, that inability or unwillingness to express, the thirst that from the soul doth rise and all of the rest of it. What do you make of that?
Well, it is interesting, and I think it's a very valid point. People at the moment, we need a sense of purpose in life, and I think without that sense of purpose, it's going to get very, very difficult. I always advocate about the power of artificial intelligence. They talk about taking over jobs and enhancing people's lives so people will have more leisure time. The question is this, though, they have more leisure time, what are they going to do with it? And I think that's the real issue. I'm very interested in your guest as well. He converted recently in your introduction, talked to Catholicism. I'll be fascinated if he's happy to share that, why he made that conversion, and whether that's changed his view of life.
Well, Gavin, how do you respond?
I'd be very happy to answer, because I spent quite a lot of my time, a lot of my life being quite prejudiced against Catholicism. There's quite a lot of disinformation out there, and also some bad history. When I'd simply discovered that what the Roman Catholic Church had taught was true, and one of the things that it's got in its repertoire, so to speak, is a lot of very holy people, an enormous amount of saintliness that has changed society wherever it's been. And then they invented the schools and the hospitals and the hospices and the universities. It all came out of Catholicism. The whole of Western culture did, really. And as there's a crisis now in Western culture, we're actually involved in destroying ourselves. There's an anti-life thing, anti-life in the womb, anti-life at euthanasia, anti-life as we allow our children to destruct their capacity for reproduction. So Catholicism, as I looked at it more carefully, as liberal Protestantism began to evaporate in front of my eyes, began, as I tested it, to be true. And I thought, I better grab it fast while there's any time left. And I'm very glad I did.
Have you been reassured then by the performance, if that's the right word, of leaders within the Catholic faith? Because I have looked on at faith leaders across the piece and been disappointed. You found it differently.
No, not at all. No, I think they behaved appallingly. The first thing I did was to read a history of bad popes so that I wouldn't be let down or disappointed. I think what has to distinguish between people who are the people who are running the organisation and the thing itself. The thing itself has an organic life in it, which goes on producing holiness and transformed lives. The people who run it are sometimes good, they're sometimes bad. At the moment, I think they lack courage. I'm afraid all the religious leaders appear to have drunk the Kool-Aid of secular society, perhaps to get approval, because I think they're frightened. But what today requires is courage of people who say they can see clearly. We certainly need leaders to help facilitate the organisation who've got courage and deep wells. We don't have enough of those at the moment. But the project itself has to do with Jesus. If the Catholic Church in particular was a human construct, it would have failed 10 times a century over the last 20 centuries. But it isn't a human construct, and Jesus has kept it alive, mainly through his own life, which he's shared with people who want to cooperate. We're tempted to try and use power to put things right, but power isn't the way forward. It's cooperation with compassion, with the God of compassion, and that's a kind of like it's a dance. It's a relationship. It's all to do with the baby. The baby grows up. We discover the baby is not just a baby, but a savior. Not just a savior, but the creator of the universe. And we start a dance with him. And not even an institutional church can crush that.
Do you feel hope this Christmas Eve, this day of all days? Is that hope still there for you?
It is, but my hope is directed in a particular way. My hope is directed partly in response to the people you said who are writing to you. Why are they a sign of hope? Because they've run out of patience with the status quo. They've run out of patience with the half lies and the lies of consumerism. They've run out of patience with all the soft untruths they've been told. And they want to know now how to live. It matters. Essentially, it's the old religious language of how am I saved? People ran up to Jesus all the way through the Gospels saying, how do I get out of this? How do I get beyond this? How do I manage this? And to everyone he came up to, he gave a particular answer that met their need, and as a type of us, meets our needs too. So for me, my hope is when I pick up the Gospels and I read them and read the life of Jesus, I go, with him, this can be overcome. Anger can be healed, hatred can be forgiven, the cheek can be turned, violence can be subverted by love, despair is overcome by hope and compassion. Absolutely, there is hope, but it's all to do with him and not so much with us.
A perfect message of hope. Thank you so much, Gavin, and Merry Christmas to you and yours.
Thank you, and to you and to everyone listening. God bless you.
Here we are upon another break, after which I'll be joined by American author Laurel Gillan, whose novel A Bellwether Christmas tells the story of the history of Christmas. Don't go anywhere.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live on Christmas Eve. We've had a look at the religious significance and importance of Christmas. Now it's time to contemplate the history the way in which historians have contemplated that story and really start to understand all that is behind Christmas celebrations and what it was like to celebrate in years gone by. Laurel Gillan, novelist, joins me now. Hello, Laurel.
Hello, Neil. It's great to be here.
Merry Christmas to you and yours. Now, I understand that all of this sprung from a trip that you made to Italy with your grandmother. Can you tell me about that trip and what it was that you experienced?
Well, I took my grandmother to Italy, and we were with an ecumenical group that was traveling all around Rome and central Italy, and I really fell in love with the stories about the early Franciscans. And I was already kind of mad about medieval times anyway. So when I got back home, I started doing an incredible amount of research into that period, the early 13th century. But an adult novel I was thinking of never appeared. And then what happened in the years following, we adopted a son, and he happened to be very, very good with animals and loved them. And little by little, we acquired 2 sheep, 2 donkeys, and horse. And then, 2 decades later, all of a sudden, I got this idea for this novel set in the 13th century, and it would use my knowledge of the early Franciscan history as well as my knowledge of farm animals.
At the top of the show, Laurel, I mentioned St. Francis as the man behind the first production of a nativity play, so to speak.
Yes.
What was it? What was it about? Because I'm interested because I have my own affection for Francis, and I wonder what it was about his story that inspired you.
Well, I just, Francis is a larger-than-life character. He had such a flair for the dramatic, and he was just so earnest and so committed to this vision he had of living life in a poor and humble way and helping others. And plus, the fact that he had this affinity with animals also makes him very endearing to me. And I just thought that everything going on at that time was in the church and everything, the history of the church and everything at that point was also very interesting. And he really sparked, a revival in the church.
Andrew, you mentioned earlier in our conversation that your consumerism is part of a problem, because it blinds everyone to what Christmas is actually about. And I've always been attracted by St. Francis and his notions about poverty.
Yes.
Is there something in that message about it? It doesn't have to be about what you own, what you can buy, that you can find your way to peace.
Without a doubt. And actually, people who are poor don't necessarily know that they're poor. And until you start seeing the massive people showing off their wealth in your face and the dash to the garage late on the Christmas Eve to buy a present for someone just so they've got something under the tree, it shouldn't be about that. I love the story about the animals. I grew up with lots of animals. We had 18 horses and dogs. We had same sort of dogs. We had our Irish wolfhounds and things like that, right down to the tiddly little ones. And it's a glorious thing. I think that going back to nature, the simple things in life, you can get real pleasure from it. It doesn't have to be about materialistic things.
Laurel, why do you think it's so affecting for all of us, I think children especially, the way in which animals are undoubtedly folded into the nativity story? Every child learns that the birth of Jesus is accompanied by and happens in the presence of animals and shepherds who care for animals. Why does that bring something special to this time of year?
I think it brings something special because of what happened 800 years ago. I mean, there's that same reaction. You see that the King of the universe has humbled himself so much that he's become this helpless, poor babe, and he's lying in an animal trough, which is what, a feeding trough, which is what a manger is. And he's surrounded by these lowliest of creatures, which are animals. And I think it just, when the people of Greccio, Italy saw that 800 years ago, it just mesmerized them. They just felt this connection to God and understanding, I think, of the kind of sacrifice it took. the gift of love that it represented. And I think that has never stopped since then. For 800 years, we've been doing living nativities and nativity sets, because seeing that, poor, humble setting really, I think, really brings it home. The gifts message really home to us.
I said earlier in the show, Laurel, and I'll say it again, I often feel year on year Christmas feels watered down, especially in the West. Its significance, the meaning eroded. People are even discouraged sometimes from using the word Christmas, and they're encouraged for bizarre reasons to talk about the winter season and to offer season's greetings and so on and so on. Do you agree that it's often Christmas that feels like the festival that is least respected in many ways?
I think that's something that's been happening for a long time, because back in history, I mean, even in the Middle Ages, the church was kind of struggling with the fact that it had adopted all these practices from the Romans and the Celts and the Vikings, and also a lot of this was barely Christian. So today, we have the same thing. It's like the commercialism and everything else. We still have to make an effort to really, I think, come to that Christmas message in our hearts every Christmas season.
I want to end with my guests this time, particularly on an optimistic note. What are your hopes for Christmas, for yourself and for the wider community this year?
You always say, you want Christmas peace and things like that. But I really think just a better understanding of what Francis was all about, and his love for mankind and for God and for all God's creatures. One of the things Francis said near the end of his life is that he wished, back then, he loved the birds, and songbirds in particular. Back then, they were often used for food. And he used to say, well, I wish everyone would feed the birds on Christmas. So that would, I guess, be my wish this Christmas season in honor of the 800th anniversary of the nativity scene.
Lovely. Laurel Gillan, novelist, author of A Bellwether Christmas, thank you so much for bringing that message to us this evening.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Andrew, it is an optimistic.
Yes.
It's an optimistic message.
Oh, I love it. It's very good. Feed the birds because they sometimes feed us. Work on that basis.
Charging towards another break, the last one of the evening. I'll be joined afterwards by Professor Ralph Schulhammer to discuss the history of the Christmas tree. Don't go anywhere else.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Christmas Eve, Neil Oliver Live. Now, there's always a debate about whether or not to have a real Christmas tree or an artificial Christmas tree, and it happens in households up and down the country, year in and year out. But one thing worth contemplating, worth looking at, is the history of the Christmas tree itself. So I'm delighted in that context to be joined by a familiar face, a friend of this show, Professor Ralph Schulhammer, to discuss the history of the Christmas tree, where we now put our gifts in certainly in the British tradition of it all. Ralph, good evening. Merry Christmas to you.
Neil, Merry Christmas to you. This is the highlight of my career, being with you on Christmas Eve and talking about the Christmas tree. I think I can put my commentary career to rest after this.
Oh, bless you, Ralph. Merry Christmas to you too. We've spoken several times over the years, always about serious issues, all manner of political stories, but never about Christmas. So we can put right that wrong now. And it was a delight for me to learn that you've given a lot of thought to Nordic Christmas traditions and the advent of the Christmas tree in particular. How come?
Well, I have no choice. As your viewers will be happy to find out, all the cool Christmas traditions come from people with German accents. So from the Krampus to the Christmas tree, right? It all started in Germany. And it's really actually a nice story. Supposedly, kind of the first Christmas trees came up in Germany, or what then later became Germany in the 15th, 16th century. And one story I really like is that Martin Luther, apparently he once saw the stars above, and he was so moved by it that he said, wouldn't it be nice kind of when we have these evergreens in our houses to put lights on it? And that supposedly was the beginning of the Christmas tree and putting candles on the tree. Now, I don't know if Henry VIII and the beginning of the Anglican Church had a similar story about being moved by the skies, but I think it's given the Protestant Reformation, everything, I think it's a very, very nice story. And it's what I really like about it, it's the greatest story of cultural appropriation that ever happened, because the idea of the Christmas tree comes from the solstice, 22nd, 21st of December is the last really short day, and then finally days get longer, and you kind of have this very nice way how Christianity adopted it and turned it into something of its own in a way that ultimately worked for everybody. So I think the story of the Christmas tree is, politically, if we want to go down this road, is probably more relevant than one would think.
Andrew Eborn, it is interesting, isn't it, how very pragmatic Christianity was in so many ways in its attempts to bring and to map onto older and established traditions.
Absolutely, and you look back at the pagan traditions and so on and so forth, and I think some of the very first Christmas tree, which was artificial, actually used to have geese feathers dyed green, I think, on that sort of basis. And I've heard different people have been attributed with the story about seeing the stars through the trees and deciding about lights and everything, everybody from Charles Darwin to the various people that Ralph mentioned as well. It is fascinating how we've sort of done that. It's the same with mistletoe, which was all about fertility and how that sort of worked on that sort of basis. But a lot of it goes back to pagan times and celebrating that sort of era.
Ralph, there's something very primal and fundamental, though, isn't there, about focusing on something that's evergreen. You can sense, going back through the millennia, the efforts that people made in the darkest of days and the coldest of nights to look for signs that life would return. And so to focus on the tree that remains alive when everything else has died, you can see why people would fix on the conifer, the fir tree.
Oh God, absolutely. I mean, and you see something else. You see how much human life depended on the seasons. So if we really want this Christmas kind of reflect a little bit on our age and on our current condition, I think one of the things, when we discussed over the year on your show these issues so often, is we live in this great position. We're in this great position that we are no longer depending on the seasons, right? You can go to the supermarket and you can have, I don't know, a pineapple for Christmas. And it's no longer the case that we are completely, quote unquote, subservient to the whims of nature. And, many reasons for this is technological process, is the use of energy, all the things that have been on people's minds over the last 24 months. So there is a connection there. And I wish all your viewers a Merry, Merry Christmas, right? And I hope that many of them will have a happy Christmas and will go with, their spirits lifted and with new energy into the new year. But I think you're absolutely right. If we look at the Christmas tree, as you just mentioned, this idea that finally, right, kind of the days will get longer, that finally spring is on the horizon, kind of as a positive message, and that we nowadays, in this day and age, no longer depend so much on the whims of nature and the seasons, is really something to ponder upon and to be grateful. I mean, there's a lot wrong with modernity. There's a lot that could be different. There's a lot that could be better. But some things actually have gotten better over the last decades or the last centuries, if you want. And I think it's worthwhile to, in a positive way, ponder about this as well.
Mm. Do you get a sense, Ralph, that people are more determined than ever to celebrate this year? I mean, obviously, there are people struggling in unfamiliar ways. Germany, is struggling for energy. People have been cutting down old-growth forests just for firewood, for warmth, and all of the rest of it. Do you think that the hardship, ironically, inspires in people the determination to look back at the old traditions about lights and fires and evergreen trees to get them through the darkness?
I hope so. I think a revival of those traditions and the way we look at life that's connected to it would be a good thing, even if it's only once or twice a year, right? I understand if this is not something that happens every day, but I think that would be a good thing. I think you see a little bit of revival of this, particularly in the German-speaking world. The forest and the trees always had a very specific significance that goes back to the idea that our history began with defeating the Romans in the Teutoburger forest. So basically, among the trees, our nation was born. If you want, at least that's one of the myths that's also surrounding a German mythology. But yes, I think we all sense that the last 2 years, or the last year in particular, was different. There is something happening on the horizon. So I think there is a sense among people that the next year or the coming years will be very different from the preceding ones. And I hope that kind of one message also to your viewers, let's get into this new as happy warriors. The challenges are great. The things that we have to overcome are significant. The changes that we want to see are substantial. But I think we should not lose hope, we should not lose faith, and we should not lose, particularly as the British, a certain sense of humor, right? Let's be serious about these issues, but be happy warriors about it. I think this is probably, that would be my New Year's message to myself and also to your viewers and to your listeners.
Fantastic, Ralph. Happy warriors. Merry Christmas to you and yours. Thanks so much for everything that you've done for Neil Oliver Live in the year past, and I'll look forward to conversing with you again in the new year. But thank you so much for now, Ralph Scholhammer.
Merry Christmas, Neil. See you soon.
See you soon. Lovely message there. Happy warriors.
Happy warriors. We can do that together. We feel good, don't we? I mean, we talk about having a peaceful new year. Boy, do we need a peaceful new year.
We do, but that idea of focusing on light, focusing on warmth, focusing on the evergreen and the knowledge that, after the shortest day,
right,
the days get longer and the sun and the spring and all signs of life will come back to us, and we should embrace.
Oh, without it. And as you say, the key to it is about hope. Let's all have hope.
Absolutely. Let's always all have hope. Thank you so much to my brilliant panellist, Andrew Eborn, to all of my guests this evening. All that remains for me is to wish every single one of you the happiest, the merriest of Christmases and the most optimistic and hopeful of Happy New Years. See you soon.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather. It's going to stay unsettled through the festive period, though it will turn calmer and drier as we move into Boxing Day. Low pressure currently dominating the weather pattern, bringing further rain for many through Christmas Day, but a brief respite and that ridge of high pressure bringing dry, sunny weather for many on Boxing Day. This evening, a mixed picture out there. Outbreaks of rain across southern counties of England and Wales. Showery rain as well, Northern Ireland, Northern England. In between, clearer spells under the clearest skies of Scotland, turning chilly tonight, some frost and ice. Elsewhere, generally staying mild, and those winds just easing after what has been a very blustery and mild Christmas Eve. Christmas Day gets off to a bright start, a chilly start across north-east Scotland. Elsewhere, generally quite cloudy, and this area of outbreaks of rain pushes north and eastwards across England and Wales through the day, turning heavy at times. Rain bumping into Scotland will turn to snow over the higher ground above about 200 metres. 5 to 10 centimetres is possible, giving a white Christmas here. But elsewhere, wet Christmas, mild as well, and breezy temperatures in double figures. After a cold start Boxing Day morning, it's looking much drier and brighter. Plenty of sunny spells to come, but signs of the next weather system starting to move in across Devon and Cornwall, bringing outbreaks of rain here, and temperatures a little lower for many, but mild air returns as it becomes wet and windy through into Wednesday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Knock again. Hello? 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 Who is it? We're here for the show. What show? We're filming a television show. This is a medieval castle, you silly man. It's for besieging and sword fighting. It's not for some so-called television program. But we made arrangements. Strange person. I am bored of you. Your auntie soiled her knickers, and your mother was a vacuum cleaner. Huh? Let us in! I spit on your gonads, you quarter-witted son of a cabbage hunter. Is there someone else up there that I can speak to? Go boil your bottom. Can you throw him off the ramparts, please? All right. Well, I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
Oh, well, Stephen Fry. Stephen, it is lovely to have you here, you silly man.
It's lovely to be had here, if I may say.
I want to know about cricket because you've just become president of the MCC, and he has just shown me this tie. Show the tie.
Yes,
and he
an
claims
MCC
it's an
tie.
MCC
Can you
tie.
zoom in to that little symbol there? It's the device that says MCC, Marylebone Cricket Club,
Isn't that
or 1,200 in Roman numerals. Yes, I mean,
But you
I
have
know.
to be a member to get that.
Yes,
Yeah.
you buy it from the members' shop at Lord's.
So tell me about cricket, because it's all changing. And it's a beautiful, beautiful game. It's still the only game that is very like the one I used to watch in Weston-super-Mare in Clarence Park in 1948.
Well, that's because we're guardians of the law, the laws of cricket, the MCC. Other games have rules. Cricket has laws. But each tournament will have its regulations, like where the fielders can be, how far from the bat, and so on. But there are laws of cricket, which are the same on a beach in West Indies, or in a slum in Mumbai with stickball, or in a village in England, or in Weston-super-Mare. Those are the laws of cricket. I mean, yes, it is the same game, but it's like a lot of British institutions. It sent its footprint abroad,
Yes,
and has been reinterpreted and often improved upon, or at least enhanced in different ways.
I was very proud the other day when Afghanistan beat Sri Lanka. I thought, isn't it incredible the reach that this game
it's getting
has?
wider and wider.
Yeah.
It's the second most popular sport in the world. By quite a long way. Obviously, football is the first, yeah. And a lot of that is to do with the fact that it's so... Well, it's the third religion in India. They
Yes.
call it the third religion.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy about it. And obviously, India is about to overtake China as the country with the largest population in the world. So that kind of skews the statistics a bit. But it's the most popular sport in Nepal.
Nepal.
And I'm a patron of the MCC Foundation, and our aim is to spread cricket around the world as much as possible.
Are you going to get into South America?
Yes, that is.
Yes.
That's our next thing. It's not really there. I mean, there's a bit in Guyana, of course. We had
yes.
Mark Ramprakash and others, and who have sort of ancestors from there. And Guyana provides the West Indies with cricketers because it's Caribbean.
True.
But yeah, we want to if you can find a flat bit. But it's Rwanda, Kenya. Recently, the foundation went to the Lebanon and taught Syrian refugees who are penned up in camps with nothing to do at all, but turned to kind of crime and misery and upset. And to teach the girls and boys in particular is fantastic because a lot of these countries are countries in which girls have low expectations of their lives. As far as education, property rights and so on are concerned. And if you can get girls and boys playing cricket together, it's absolutely wonderful. There comes an age when they'll separate out into a girls' boy and a boys' team. But when they're young, it helps the boys respect and like the girls.
It's spreading into the Middle East, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is. And I suppose we can also talk of the terrors of the Middle East. We're speaking on a day. Who knows what's going to happen when this actually is broadcast, but we're speaking on a day when they announced this, to me, diabolical news about golf, which is a game I love as well, and the Saudi Arabian influence in it.
It's all money, Stephen, isn't
so
it?
because this is a free speech haven, I can talk about the behind this because it's the strongest words will do sometimes. The hypocrisy.
I know a worse one, but I will tell you afterwards.
I'd love to hear it. No,
I'll write it on
I've got it out of my system now. That's the main thing. But no, it does upset me, and the history of what Saudi Arabia's done in the last 5 or 6 years, and now to be, I know it's a cliche word, but sports washing is essentially it. And the chances are, by the time you're watching this, that Lionel Messi will be playing for Saudi Arabia, as well as Cristiano Ronaldo and others.
It's amazing what money will do, isn't it? I mean, when you think that London was the #1 centre for the laundering of Russian dirty money, I mean, it didn't make me feel proud.
No, they called it Boristan for a time.
I didn't know that.
We're none of us entirely wide-eyed and naive about the world. We know that the world, and it has always been the case, that money talks and that everybody has a price to some extent.
Do you know what Napoleon said?
No, go on.
He said the surprising thing is not that every man has his price,
but how low it is.
Yes.
Yes, I would have said the same.
How low it is. I think that's hilarious.
I've always thought the greatest power a human being can have in negotiations, whether it's as an actor, like in a film, as minor as that, or in a huge boardroom way, the greatest power you can have is the power to walk away.
Yeah.
Just to be able to say, oh, no, this is not for me, and go. But I know some people in business who will say that the first thing you sense when you sit round a table, say about the sale of a company or it going public, the share offering, is you instantly know the greedy ones, and they're the ones you want to have nothing to do with, who are in it to make money, and I am in that sense very naive. In the early 90s, late 80s, when I was aware that the internet was going to happen, and I became very excited by it. And through the 90s, I became very excited by it. And we'd have lots of meetings with people who had ideas, and the really good ones wanted to make something extraordinary. Like an artist or a craftsman, like someone who just wanted to make a better pair of shoes, make a better table, the pleasure, the fun, the fulfillment of it. And then you started to notice, because the internet caught fire, that people were in it to make money. That the first thing they wanted to do was to build a service or a piece of software that they could immediately sell to, Bill Gates or to somebody else. And then it got worse. It got so
worse.
much. Yeah, there's a word, and this is in a sense, what Saudi Arabia is doing with sport. It's the darkest word of our era, I think, is the word disruption. It sounds simple. It's just the Latin for break down, break up, break into pieces. To disrupt, like you interrupt, you break into someone's conversation, and you get a rupture. It's a break, and so on. So, in 2007, when Facebook was beginning to take off, Mark Zuckerberg famously said that the motto of Facebook is "Move fast and break things." And this was considered a heroic new stance. These young people were coming in, they were breaking up the way the world was, and they were making huge sums of money out of it. They were inventing new ideas and they were sweeping away everything from the past. And so you disrupt the bread and breakfast space with Airbnb. You disrupt the car hire and taxi services with Uber. You disrupt. And we're now living in a broken world because things have been disrupted and they've not been replaced with anything like.
And they've been disrupted by people who just want to be very, very rich.
Yes.
And not to do one thing superbly well.
And the betrayal, to me, the betrayal, the hypocrisy, whatever your word is, that somehow we believed in the 90s and early 2000s that these guys in jeans and T-shirts were just kind of, gentle, sweet people who wanted the world to be better.
Yeah.
And we now know that in Orwell's magnificent image, the pigs are now wearing trousers. The end of Animal Farm, they look through and they see the pig.
Yes, I forgot.
And it's all come round. And you realise these are worse in terms of their fierce, greedy.
But have you ever understood why people want to be so rich? We all want to be able to have a better bottle of wine, or we all want to have a nice car, or maybe a slightly bigger house. But I think the point of being very rich is to be able to tell people that you are very rich.
Yes. Essentially. I think it is a display. It's very fashionable these days to look into genetics and ancestry and to picture our ancestors in a cave or in a field or, hunting and gathering. And we know that some part of being human is acquisition, is territorial acquisition. And whether it's land, building a castle like this as a display as well as a defence. And money is a defence as well as display. It protects you from everything in the world, as a castle does.
But why such huge sums of it?
I don't know. I suppose when you get a huge sum...
Are they competitive with each other?
That's the point I was going to say. You join a sort of club in which, people in the suburbs might say, they've got a better lawnmower than I have. I'm going to have to upgrade my lawnmower. I'm going to have to upgrade my strimmer and all the sort of suburban things, keeping up with the Joneses, we call it. We've talked about that all our lives. We know it as a phenomenon. But you scale it up. You simply scale it up. And we know this is true. I mean, I can still picture the moment